coming today. I mean, what a year it's been. 9 months ago, we held the biggest event of its kind in decades. Over 4,000 people came to the launch event of the People's Assembly to form the People's Assembly in this room here and just down the road in Westminster Central Hall. And I think it's important to stress that day, that event was just the start of a movement. And I think it's important to look back at why we formed the People's Assembly in the first place. Because since the financial crash happened and the 22nd of June last year, when we formed the People's Assembly, in between those times there was lots of anti-cuts groups that sprung up across the country. There was lots of very good campaigns locally. There were some big mobilisations to save local hospitals. There was big mobilisations around library campaigns, bedroom tax campaigns, all of these kinds of things. UK Uncut and Occupy inspired millions and millions of people with the actions that they took. And of course there was big trade union, very big and important trade union initiatives, including strikes, and of course the TUC, the massive TUC demonstrations, national demonstrations that took place. But there was no vehicle that could bring all of these things together on a national and a local level, and which could decide on the priorities that everybody worked towards together. And I think that's important to stress, because not only do we have to take on austerity on a national and local level, but when we all work together, when we're all pointing in the same direction, we're 10 times more effective. And since the launch, I think we've made some serious steps towards achieving this. But I also think it's worth pointing out that since the launch, I think we're facing now a much weaker and weaker government. The so-called economic recovery exposes that what we've said all along was absolutely right. The crisis was being used as an excuse to dismantle the welfare state and restructure society to benefit the rich. And the recovery, I think what that says to people, the so-called recovery, I think that says to people that it's getting better for those at the top, while austerity continues for us at the bottom. And Cameron even admits this himself. In a speech at the end of last year, at the Lord Mayor's banquet in the City of London, he announced that there needs to be permanent austerity. Regardless of the deficit, there needs to be permanent austerity. I think also that the recent floods actually created a fantastic political crisis for the government. It actually exposed how ineffective the government is while tied to the private sector. But also, public opinion is stacking up higher and higher against them on key issues. And you just need to look at public opinion around things like privatisation of the NHS, privatisation of the Royal Mail, sell-offs of our public services. I think we're starting to win the argument around whether or not cuts are necessary. But also, if you look at the recent strikes that have taken place, and the London Underground strikes is certainly one to point to here, what actually happened there was that they managed to gain majority public support, which I think was absolutely fantastic, and it indicates that there's a growing mood and a growing potential for resistance as we move forward. And I just want to go over really the development of the People's Assembly since the launch, because since the launch conference, groups started springing up across the country, and to date we've got close to 100 local People's Assembly groups set up. In town after town, city after city, meetings and rallies of sizes not seen for over a decade have been taking place up and down the country. And I think it's important to stress that not all groups are of course at the same kind of level. Some have managed to become the centre and the hub of resistance in their town or in their locality. Some have found it very difficult and challenging to sustain themselves after their launch events, but most are in between the two. And I'm sure we'll discover. I'm looking forward to hearing from reports from groups from across the day about campaigning locally. But the People's Assembly is based on creating alliances around action and the groups have been the strongest when working towards national mobilisations. And I think the importance of this approach became obvious in the run-up to the national demonstration in Manchester at the Tory Party conference on the 29th of September. It's absolutely clear that the local People's Assembly groups were at the centre of mobilisations for that demonstration, and I think the People's Assembly brought thousands and thousands of people out onto that demonstration. The November the 5th Day of Action, I think, displayed and showed the creativity and boldness that this movement has, and just that day was the biggest day of direct action in many, many years. It had a very big impact with actually relatively small, few people compared to the big demonstrations, but we had events taking place up and down the country. There was events ranging from just street stunts to protests to roadblocks to occupations, but that day got widespread media coverage, and I think it's also important to note, and I think it's significant, that the TUC voted to support that day of civil disobedience and direct action, which must be a first for the TUC. And I just want to go over what the People's Assembly has also been achieving nationally. We continue to be supported by a wide range of organisations and high-profile individuals, including 12 national trade unions. We've become a true umbrella organisation, and when I say true umbrella organisation, it's that the People's Assembly is organised by the supporting organisations that you can see in the conference packs. I think it's also important to note that there's some very good new initiatives that have developed out of the People's Assembly, some national initiatives including the Student Assembly, the Women's Assembly, which launched a couple of weeks ago, and there's obviously the Labour Assembly working with inside the Labour Party, but linking it up to a wider movement. We are now able to pay two people on a part-time wage, although we do work full-time. And then some, yeah, absolutely. And it's worth saying, sending our thank you to the morning staff for providing us with a free national office. But the truth is the central infrastructure is far too small. We'll have a finance report in a second from the Treasurer, but what that report shows is that our income is far too low at the moment, and actually we need to be thinking about getting more staff involved, essentially. We need to be able to, just two staff in the National Office is just not enough to support the growth and the development of the close to 100 local groups that we've got set up, and obviously we're interested in doubling the amount of local groups that we've got across the country. So that means, I think, that strengthening the national infrastructure has to be an absolute priority for everybody in the room today. And I think that does mean that we need to think about setting up standing orders. We need to set up a monthly donation to the People's Assembly. I'd just like to go through the action plan, because I think we've achieved a huge amount in less than a year. But today is about stepping up this pressure. The proposed action plan gives us a chance to do this. I think we need to immediately start by delivering real solidarity with the strikes that are coming up across the country, and I'm pleased to say that we met with the NUT centrally to discuss about how we can support their strike on the 26th of March, and Christine will be reporting on that later on in the day. We've got a whole number of days of action which will see big, which I think can see big events taking place in every town and city across the country. And I think for the first time we've got two national mobilisations in 1 year. That's the People's Assembly called demonstration on the 21st of June and the TUC demo on the 18th of October. And I think it's these mobilisations that give us the chance to demonstrate that we are the majority. I think we've got a real opportunity to mobilise hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people out in the streets between the two demonstrations. If we do that, it's a statement that we won't be divided. Crucially, it can give confidence that whenever there's a group of people being victimised or demonised, whether that's on shows like Benefit Street or in the tabloids, or whether there's a group of workers under attack, but I think mobilising hundreds of thousands of people will demonstrate that it is possible to resist, that they're not standing alone, and that when we unite together and act together, there's a real possibility that we can win as well. And that's what the People's Assembly is about, and that's the movement that we're here to build today. So thank you very much, colleagues, and I look forward to listening to everybody's contributions in the day.